All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session about the cloud migration. My name is Nikola, and I'm mostly working on the UI part of the cloud migration. And together with me, I have Julia.
Hello, I'm a developer responsible for the backend of the cloud migration tool.
Yes, so in this session, we have prepared a lot of content for you. So we are going to start with some improvements that we did in the backend that Julia is going to talk about. We will mostly talk about the performance optimization, stability improvements, and also some really nice improvements that we got under the hood that is going to help you to spend less time on the cloud migration. Then I'm going to demo to you some of the improvements that we did to the UI, also the feature that is going to help you to move the customized fields to the table extensions. And we are going to end with the telemetry, new upgrade strategy, and we are going to briefly discuss what are we planning to add for the future for the cloud migration tooling.
Okay, thank you, Nikola. So, before talking about the recent improvements in the cloud migration replication engine, let's take a look at the usage of the tool between the years. Here there are two charts showing some very nice growth, and we would like to thank you for using the tool. We can only show the relative increase here, but trust me, the actual numbers are also very impressive. So thank you very much. So on the left chart, we can see that the number of Business Central tenants migrating their data from on-premise has almost doubled last year comparing to the previous year. And on the right, we see that the amount of data transferred to the cloud has almost tripled in 2022 comparing to the year before. And this tendency still continues this year. Business Central tenants are getting more and more data migrated from on-premise. We take year 2021 as a base because back then we removed the hard limitation on the amount of the on-premise data that can be replicated to the cloud. And that enabled cloud migration for larger installations. And in turn, it revealed some technical limitations and performance challenges that we had to address to better support high-volume cloud migration. That is, on-premise setups with a lot of companies and tables and containing huge amounts of data. And that was the project that we now completed. So before presenting the results to you, I would like to briefly describe how the replication engine works and highlight the parts of the replication process that have been improved. And then we'll talk about each of the areas in more details. As you probably know, we use Azure Data Factory pipelines to copy the data from a source database to the destination. When a migration run is triggered, the replication pipelines gets executed and it instructs special compute services called integration runtimes to access the data in both the source and the destination databases. The source can be either an on-premise SQL server or an Azure SQL database, and the destination is always an Azure SQL of a Business Central tenant. So first of all, we made quite a lot of improvements to the replication pipelines. So now they can support larger cloud migrations and also can migrate wider range of data types. During the execution, the replication pipelines use Azure Blob Storage as a temporary staging. Unfortunately, Blob Storage introduces its own limitations, and we applied some optimizations to minimize them. The data replication itself is done by two distinct processes. The large tables are copied table to table by dedicated copy activities. This process has been optimized. The smaller tables are going through the process called bulk copy. During bulk copy, the stored procedures in the on-premise SQL database collect bulks of data from many smaller tables, serialize and compress each bulk, and then split it into records in a special table. Then only this table is copied to the cloud, where the stored procedures in the tenant database apply the opposite data transformation, combine the records together, decompress, deserialize, and push the data into the corresponding tables. This process can be repeated for many bulks until all data is replicated. And it is very efficient for copying thousands of tables faster. But at the same time, it's very demanding on the SQL Server compute and input-output capabilities. And here we made some improvements as well. Finally, it's worth mentioning that we use SQL change tracking to identify the changes made to the on-premise data between the replication runs and copy only these incremental changes if it is possible. This part has also been improved, allowing us to recognize more situations where the delta sync is possible and reducing the overall migration time. Most of these improvements affect migrations from both on-premise SQL Server and Azure SQL, but there are some that make a huge difference specifically for Azure SQL sources. So let's look at these improvements in more details and see how you can benefit from them in your future migrations. Looking at the replication pipelines, we changed the way the replication metadata has been passed between the source and the destination. Instead of using the data factory activities input and output parameters, we now copy the metadata through a database table. And this allowed us to bypass the 4 megabyte data factory limitation on the activities input and output. So it has become possible to replicate an unlimited number of tables in a single migration run. And we removed the limitation on the number of companies being replicated. Of course, it's important to remember that Business Central supports not more than 300 companies in a single environment. But now all these companies can be replicated in one single run if you have a powerful on-premise SQL Server. Apart from this, we also removed the calculations on the on-premise database size from the replication runs. This calculation is done once during the cloud migration setup, and not repeating it during replication can save between 15 and 45 minutes for large source databases and reduce the probability of timeouts. And finally, we expanded the replication pipelines with the activities copying SQL sequences specific for Business Central. So now the AL number sequences data type is supported by cloud migration, and the numbering can continue in the BC tenant after migration instead of being reset. So for table-to-table copy, let's look at the optimizations here. Table-to-table copy is used for large tables. However, we reduce the threshold. Now the replication engine would pick a table for table-to-table copy if the data size to be migrated exceeds 250 megabyte, and it used to be 500 megabyte before. So this means that more tables are going through table-to-table copy now, and the replication status is updated faster for these tables. Also, tables with a lot of data tend to have many indexes defined. When the data is copied, all these indexes have to be updated on every insert. Now we disable the indexes in the target table before copying its data and rebuild the indexes after the data is replicated. And our test measurements showed 8 to 22% performance benefit for the new process comparing to the old way of inserting the data with all indexes enabled. Because both the cleanup of the target table and the data copy are now happening with no active indexes, the replication runs are much faster, and this allowed to prevent the timeouts for the large tables replication. For the bulk copy of the smaller tables, in addition to the reduced threshold, we also reduce the bulk size. So this resulted in higher numbers of smaller bulks. And smaller bulks are easier for the SQL Server to serialize and compress, so the timeouts occurrences become rare. Also, they may still happen for the extremely weak or busy SQL servers. In fact, this gave a significant performance benefit on our not very powerful test servers. The whole process of bulk copy became 60 to 80% faster. The replication status is also updated more frequently if the bulks are smaller. We also made the diagnostic runs respect the bulk size. Before, they tried to process all data in a single huge bulk, and that often led to timeouts and out-of-memory exceptions. Now, diagnostic runs utilize the same smaller bulks as the normal replication runs. They don't time out, and you can safely use them to quickly test the future replication. Finally, optimizations for the delta sync of the incremental changes, which are related to our usage of SQL change tracking. So, if the changes between two change tracking versions can be reliably collected, the replication engine performs a fast delta sync. Otherwise, the whole table has to be cleaned up and replicated again. So we forced a longer change tracking retention period that allowed the change tracking versions to stay valid longer. And that increases the probability of the fast delta synchronization for the repeated replication runs. And we changed the code to use change tracking in a wider range of the situations. For example, delta sync is now possible also for the databases that first enable change tracking specifically for cloud migration. And now delta syncs are happening more often, reducing the overall migration time. So all the improvements mentioned earlier are applied to both SQL Server and Azure SQL sources. However, if Azure SQL is used as a source, it is possible to link the source and the destination Azure SQL databases directly without the requirement of the serialized staging in an Azure Blob storage. And removing staging allowed to make the replication faster. So now we don't have to serialize and deserialize the data, and it has become possible to replicate the fields of SQL variant type. Also, the errors caused by the blob infrastructure are gone away. For example, trying to copy a record with large value in a single field like image sometimes fails in the staging blob with a message that the specified row delimiter is incorrect. So this won't happen for the migration from Azure SQL anymore. So in general, with all these changes, Azure SQL becomes a more powerful and better performing alternative to the SQL Server as a source for cloud migration. So if you have plans for some high volume migrations, you might consider deploying the on-premise database to an Azure SQL first. And if you want to migrate SQL variant fields or fields with large images, then Azure SQL as a source would be the only possibility. So the process of deploying an Azure to Azure SQL it can be quite fast if you have the right service tier in your Azure SQL database. It is also well described in the SQL Online Help. How fast it can be depends on the service tier that you have to choose for your SQL, for your Azure SQL database. And our recommendation here is to prioritize its compute and input-output capabilities. Of course, Azure SQL is not for free, and you would probably have to balance the cost and the benefit. But the more powerful service tier you get, the faster and smoother your cloud migrations will be. And with that, I pass it over to Nikola to present the new UI and other UI-driven improvements.
Thank you, Julia. So we are going to proceed with the new UI. And for the new UI, we are going to go straight into the demo. We are going to start in the old UI. And the thing that you can see here is a rather large cloud migration that I did in the old UI beforehand. So you can see how it is looking like. And one of the things that you can notice here, it is extremely hard to get an overview which data has been moved and if there has been any problems with the cloud migration, because you needed to select the specific records and then to search for the tables failed if they exist. So for example, on this replication run, you can see that the 3 tables have failed, but you have no idea what is the current status of this data. We have also seen that many partners were doing similar mistakes when going live, and these mistakes were costly to fix. So in order to address these, we have introduced a new UI. And for the first feature to demo today, I'm going to show you how you can switch between the old and the new UI. We have decided to support both for the time being because we believe that some of you have done the customizations to the old UI. So in case you need to switch between the UIs, you can invoke this action, enable disable the new UI. So if you select here and you say that you would like to use the new cloud migration UI, the product will take you to the new cloud migration UI. The new cloud migration UI is going to be shown to you by default each time when you set up BC cloud migration. GP cloud migration and SL is still using the old UI. The thing that you can see here is that now we have laid out the data in a different way. So we have a overall status showing you what is the current status of the cloud migration like this. And the reason why we did this is because you have a single cloud migration. So now the UI is actually representing the state much better. And you also have a set of steps that you did to this cloud migration. So you can see the history as the migration log, which is below. When we have also split it like this, now you do not need to select a record if you want to start the upgrade or any other action. We will check the overall status when performing the actions. Another thing that is very visible is that you have actually failures, and there are 6 tables that have failed the replication. If you invoke the drill down here, it is going to be visible which tables currently have the problem that you need to address and fix. Then if we go back, now if we add up, here the system is saying 6 tables, but if we add up, there is more failures in the log. So you can see that here is 9 tables that have failed the replication. And the reason why is because if you select, for example, this one here, the thing that you will see is that the text is not highlighted red. And you will also see that the last replication status is successful. And if you drill down on this action here, you will be able to see that there is a later run which has copied the data that has failed, which means that you do not have the problem on this table, so there is no action that is required from you. If you would like to analyze what has happened, you can also invoke the show all replication actions, and then we can show you all of the runs in which this table was involved. And this is the same data as you have seen before. So you see that there was 1 run that failed, and then there was 1 run that was successful, and 1 record was copied in total. So with the new UI, now you're able to see which tables have failed the replication and which tables are requiring your attention immediately. One of the flows that we wanted to improve is if a small table fails. In many cases, partners would just like to migrate the data from this specific table. And unfortunately, this was not possible because we would block it. And then you would not be able to move this data either through a customized solution or through a rapid start. So to enable you to be more efficient, we have added this action which is called unblock the table. So if you invoke it, we are going to mark the table as passed, and we will allow you to write the data to it. So if you invoke this action here, we will say to you that the table was successfully unblocked, and now you can move the data through the configuration, packages, or the other means. One thing that you should do before invoking the action is to note down in which company and which table failed, because we remove it out of the list. So when you invoke the action, it is going to be a bit harder to find which table has failed. So unfortunately, we do not keep the track of the failed tables. Then in the new UI, you can see the overall status of the companies. So you can see that I have missed 8 companies to be moved. If you are wondering which companies are moved and which companies are not, here you can go to the replicated filter and say no. And here you're going to see which companies you have not moved from the on-prem. So we're not going to include it for the purpose of this demo, so we're just going to exit here. Then another thing that you can use this new UI for is that you can see the overall status of all of the tables that have been moved. So if you invoke it here, you will be able to see the status of all of the tables across the different runs. So here you can see all of the tables that have been moved for the specific companies. You can filter per company, and one of the things I would strongly recommend you to do is to select per database tables and to check what is the status for the per database tables. Here you can see that the custom report layout and report selections were completely replaced. And you will see that these tables have the delta, and the reason why they have the delta is because they are tenant media tables. So tenant media, if it was copied successfully, it needs to have more records than there are in the on-prem database because we never replaced the data. In case the data was replaced, or in case we have copied less records than there is in the source database, please open a support ticket and we are going to help you. This should not happen, but it is good to verify because unfortunately we do not have the warning system in place yet. And the last item that you can see here is the upgrade tags, and here we are not able to get the records because the table is marked as internal, thus we will just put a small warning. The tables that are internal or marked as obsolete removed, we cannot do anything about them, unfortunately. We cannot provide the account, so we just show a warning and keep an eye on the data that is being moved. Then the next functionality that you can use this page for is that if you are wondering what has happened to the specific type of data, we would need to select all so we can go back. And then if you go to the table name, and here, if I would like to know what has happened to the changelog entry, so I can type. And when I invoke OK, and I select the changelog entry table, we are going to tell you that the table is excluded from the cloud migration because it has the replicate data property set to false. We are also going to show you the message that it was empty on the on-prem table, so this page can provide you additional details, what has happened to the specific table and why the data is not moved. Alright, so that was all regarding the overview of the data. Then the next thing that you can use the new page for is that now we have a complete cloud migration status, and if you try to invoke it, we are going to do the sanity check. And in this case I cannot complete the cloud migration because there are failed tables. So I need to pull the data to make sure that all of the data is moved, and then I can complete the cloud migration. But if I would like to stop the cloud migration so I can do something, I can use the pause and abandon actions, and I have them here. So I can use pause cloud migration, and we recommend to use this action if you plan to continue it. And the second one is the abandon cloud migration, which you can use if you are planning to delete the environment and completely abandon the cloud migration. There is no difference between these two actions except sending the telemetry and telling to us what is the current status of this environment. So if you regret abandoning the cloud migration, you can simply reconfigure it again and everything is going to work. I have done this in the log, so you can see it here. I have abandoned the cloud migration because I needed to reconnect DR, which was the wrong step, but I simply did it to show you that it is possible to enable it again and pull the data if needed. And for the last expert feature that we have added an action so you can sanitize the data. So if you go to the actions and sanitize the tables, so if you forgot to run invoke nav sanitize table on-prem, which we strongly recommend that you do, you can sanitize it in SaaS, but you need to select the company and you need to select the table that you want to sanitize. So it has to be a specific company and a specific table. And then when you invoke the sanitize table, we will run the code that should have been done on-prem by the invoke nav sanitize field action. This can affect the performance of the tenant, so we recommend to run it outside of the business hours. And again, I will repeat, please run this action on-prem to make sure that the data that you're copying to SaaS is correct. Okay, that was all for the new UI. So moving to the next UI feature is moving customized fields to the table extensions. On the previous Tech Days, we have announced that we are planning to do this, and we have invited you to help us to test the feature and to provide us feedback. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank 20 partners that have participated in this effort and provided the feedback and tested the functionality which we have developed. We have shipped it with the version 21 actually, because we backported the code to make it more efficient. To explain the feature, if you have not used it before, is if on-prem you have customized Microsoft on tables. So let's say that to the table customer you have added 3 fields that you want to move to SaaS, and you have some fields that you want to leave behind. So in SaaS, of course, you cannot have customized fields in Microsoft on tables, so it can only contain Microsoft on fields. All of the data needs to be moved into table extensions, and let's say that you want to split the data in 2 table extensions. Customer is going to be copied automatically because it has replicate data property set to true. So we are going to insert a default mapping by name, and we are going to search for all of the fields that we can map by name and type, and we are going to automatically replicate. If we do not do anything, the other fields are going to be left behind. But now you are able to do these simple migration table mappings, and this will copy the custom fields to the target table if the fields match. So if you specify 2 table mappings, Engine will be able to split the data between these 2 table extensions and automatically map the fields that it can by name and type. One important thing to note here is that you need to rename the fields. So you will need to prefix them so they are called the same as in on-prem and in SaaS. You can do this in either CL, because CL allows breaking changes, but you can also use SQL scripts, because the only thing that the engine is looking at is the SQL definition. So it is even possible to rename the fields in SQL. On the keynote, you have seen that we are planning to introduce namespaces, and the goal of the development team is to eliminate prefixes and suffixes in all of the objects, including the table names and the table fields. So hopefully this rename in the future is not going to be needed. To show you this feature in the action, we are going to move to the next demo. Here in SQL, I have 2 tables. One is customer and the second one is GL entry. And as you can see, they all have customized fields. I have already renamed them through the SQL script. So this one is named PTE1 and this one is PTE2 and PTE3, because I would like to split this customer table into 3 table extensions. And it's the same for the GL entry table. I want to do the same. So I want to move 2 fields into PTE1 and the other 2 fields to the PTE2. If I switch to the Cloud Migration UI and if we go to the extensions management page, and under the manage extensions installation status, you can see that I have already uploaded 3 PTEs that I'm going to use as a target for the cloud migration. And this is of course a necessary step that you need to do before you can define the table mappings. Now, if we go back to the Cloud Migration UI, here is the action which is named Manage Custom Tables. And if we invoke it here, when it opens, you can use this page to define the table mappings. You could define it in line by selecting table extension and then filling out the other fields. However, we've seen that this is error prone. If you make a mistake when you define the migration table mappings, no data is going to be moved across. And these kind of issues are a little bit difficult to troubleshoot. To help you to add migration table mappings in an easier way, but also in a less error-prone way, we have added a dedicated UI for that. And you can access it through this section, which is called Add Table Mappings. So if you invoke this section here, on this page, the only thing that you actually need to provide is the name. And if you would like to add it so you are sure that there will be no mistakes, we recommend that you copy the definition from the SQL, including square brackets, and you just paste it into this name field here. So if I do this, the system is automatically going to parse it, and it is going to set the app ID, but this is only applicable if the table is an AL table, and it is also going to update this property is the data per company or not, because customer is the data per company, it's going to set it to true. Then you need to say that you want a table extension here, and you need to select which extensions you want to map so we can filter down the list. So we want these 3 table extensions that I have uploaded. So now here I can see all of the table extensions that the extension is containing. I could invoke OK, however that would insert 1 migration table mapping, and then I would need to repeat this process 3 times. This is not needed because if you select 3 rows, then we are going to insert 3 migration mappings. The next, if we would like to add the GL table mapping, I'm going to invoke this action again, and back to the SQL Management Studio, I'm going to copy the table name, and the thing that you can see here is that the value is already escaped, so it has the underscore instead of the slash. So I'm going to copy it like this and go here and paste it. The system is going to parse the values again, and then I just need to select these values, and when I invoke OK, it's going to insert 3 additional mappings. So now you have seen how quickly you can define 6 migration table mappings and split 2 tables onto the 3 table extensions. If you would like to save this configuration that you've done, so you don't need to repeat it again, you have the ability to import and to export this definition into a JSON file, so you can use it across the environments and across replications. However, if you are a large provider, like an ISV, and you're going to have many people using the migration mappings that you're defining, it's possible to programmatically provide migration table mappings by subscribing to onInsert default table mappings event from code unit 4001. So if you do this through code, then the table mappings are going to be inserted each time when you complete the setup wizard, or if you invoke reset migration table mappings action on the migration table mappings page. Before we move on, there is one important limitation that I would like to highlight. So we have seen that some of the partners have tried to do the following. So let's say that on the customer table they have added a field tool, and they already have the table extension in the on-prem database. And then during the cloud migration, they would like to move this field from the customer into the table extension. And they would try to do it like this by specifying a migration table mapping. So if you do it like this, it is not going to work, because the table extension is now replicated from 2 sources, and that is simply not supported by the engine. Engine is not able to merge the data coming in from 2 tables into a single target table. If you would like to unblock this one, you can either move the field tool to the table extension on-prem, or you can introduce a new table extension and then define the migration table mapping. Most of the partners select the solution 2 because it's easier for them, but you also have the solution 1 in case you need to use it. Moving on to the next topic, and that's telemetry. Approximately a few weeks ago, we have added support for the telemetry, and we have added a lot of events to the partner telemetry that you can use to track and analyze what happened to the replication runs. So you can see the full list here. We have also linked into the documentation topic in the slides. So you can get notified whenever the replication run is started, most importantly when it completes, and if it completed successfully. Then companion tables, you can get the telemetry if it was started and completed, because in some cases it would throw errors. Then you can also get the status on the upgrade events, and in case it failed, if the recovery was completed successfully. And for the completeness sake, we are also tracking when you have disabled the cloud migration. This part is quite interesting because you can use it to build the Power BI dashboards to track the progress of your cloud migrations. The example that I'm going to show to you, you can access it via this link. So it was done by our PM, and you can download it so you can use it as a base to build your own dashboards. To show you what is within this dashboard, so if we zoom in, the first thing is of course navigating to it. So you navigate to the report by selecting the cloud migration part of it. And then the first tab is going to show you what is the status across environments. So if you're running the cloud migrations for multiple environments, you can see what is happening there. And you also have the link to the admin center and also to the client, so you can quickly access the environment itself. You can use the data to build some dashboards with errors and the other KPIs, so you can get a quick overview of what is happening. And the thing that I like the best personally is the fact that you can access the cloud migration log. So you can see what is happening within the environments without actually accessing the client. So if you're running many cloud migrations, I would invite you to try out our Power BI and to see if you can get a nice overview of what is happening across the environments. If you want to access the queries, they're also on the BC Tech GitHub, so you can use it to build your own reporting. And these are the most important events that you can use to receive the email notifications. So if you would like to get email notification whenever the replication run completes and when the data upgrade completes or fails, you can subscribe to these events. On the previous BC TechDays event, there was a dedicated session on how you can set up these alerts. I would invite you to watch the recording of that one if you're interested. And we have also put some documentation articles that are going to guide you how you can set up the email notifications based on the partner telemetry. So that was all for the partner-based telemetry, and now we are moving to the new upgrade strategy topic. A few months ago, we made an important announcement, and we have also talked about it on the directions, and we have published it on Yammer, and we are using this opportunity to repeat it because it can affect some of you. If you would like to access the announcement, you can use the link on the right to access it on the official documentation site. In short, the change is that we are stopping the direct upgrade and cloud migration path from version 14. We currently support the upgrade path from 14 straight into the latest version on-prem, and you can also connect the 14 database and directly cloud migrate it into SaaS. With version 26, unfortunately, we will need to stop this upgrade path. This is in approximately 2 years, so we are giving you an early heads up because we believe that to some of you, this ability is rather important. The reason why we need to do this is because we need to clean up obsoleted fields and tables. We have not deleted anything from the table schema, actually from version 12, and across 14 versions, no table objects have been deleted. So far, we have 7 years of obsolete removed objects, and these objects are taking around 10% of the database. We need to remove these objects so we can save in space, and the second reason why we need to do this is because it is affecting our delocalization effort about moving all of the localized functionality into the extension and providing you a much better code. We have also received this request from many of the partners to be able to finally delete the obsolete removed objects and to clean them up from the schema, which is something that we as developers need to do. And we all have around 7 years of schema objects to delete. The second effort, which is being affected by this, is that we are looking into moving the tables between the extensions. So you will be able to push the table up and down the dependency chain. And both of these changes are actually quite breaking for both upgrade and cloud migration. We have received the request from the partners to ship the ability to remove the obsolete objects earlier, before version 26, and we are looking into this. We have not started the implementation of this feature yet. However, the current thinking is that it is going to work like this. So if we have a table in version 25 that has been marked with obsolete removed, and also field that is marked with obsolete removed, and we would like to get rid of them in version 26. The only thing that you would need to do is to delete the objects from the SQL. The second item is that you need to clean up the upgrade code, because now the references are going to be broken and the upgrade is not going to compile. And then the next step is to simply run the upgrade, and the engine itself is going to check if the table and the field has been marked with obsolete removed, and it is going to allow the change. Then it is going to drop the definition and remove the field and the table from the SQL definition. So, in short, the only thing that you need to do to remove the table and the field from schema is to have a version in which it is obsolete removed, and then in the next version you can delete it. We do not enforce any kind of schedule to the partners regarding the breaking changes. However, we as Microsoft, we need to follow the schedule, otherwise we would be breaking it. To understand better how this new schedule is going to work, this is the visual representation of the changes that are going to happen. In a year and a half, the active version is going to be 25. And here, the things are going to be exactly the same as they are currently. You would still need to go to 14. You can go from all of these versions into version 25, and also all of the on-prem versions are able to go straight into SaaS. As we are working on the version 26, we are going to start with deleting the objects. So we will introduce the breaking SQL changes immediately at the beginning. You will be able to see what we have done through the insider builds, and you can prepare for the changes that we are doing. And then when the version 26 is released, then the version 25 becomes the jump build. We will be forced to delete the upgrade code in version 26, which means that in order to get to 26, you need to go through 25. So all of these on-prem versions, they will need to upgrade to 25, and then from 25 to 26 as a separate upgrade step, or both versions, 25 and 26, will be able to cloud migrate directly. Now, if we would look further into the future, we are planning to do these updates every 5 years. So in every 5 versions, we are planning to introduce a jump build. When we start working on the version 30, you will need to upgrade from version 25 to 30, and all of these versions will be able to cloud migrate. However, when we introduce the version 31, it's going to contain breaking SQL changes, and then you will need to go to 30, and then from 30 to 35, and all of these versions will be able to cloud migrate. During the session, we got one really interesting question that I would like to raise here as well. One of the partners has asked us if this picture means that the on-prem is going to be supported at least until version 35. And the reason why I would like to highlight this question here is to tell you that this thing that you have just seen is our current thinking. And these are the things that we are planning to do with the current knowledge. The reason why we are sharing it with you is because we would really like to get your feedback and to also give you an early heads up about the things that we are planning to do so you can adjust. And regarding the topic, if the on-prem is going to be supported until version 35, currently there are no plans of stopping the on-prem support, and if there are any plans, they are going to be announced in advance. Also, the second thing is that it's really hard to make any plans 7 years up in the future. So this current schedule that you have seen, it can change. And in case of any changes, we are also going to announce it to you so you can prepare in time. Alright, so that was all about the new upgrade strategy, and the next topic is plans for the future. For the plans for the future, I'm going to talk about our current roadmap, and all of the items that you can see, they are currently on the backlog, and I will present them probably in the order in which we will be delivering them to you. The first item is that we want to allow you to specify the company batch size when you're replicating the data. As you have seen during Julia's part of the presentation, now you can move almost an unlimited number of companies during the replication. So we want to allow you to be able to specify if you want to move 30, 40, and 50 in case you're limited by your setup. We also want to enable you to handle these batches in an easier way, and for this we need to improve the UI. Then the next item is to give you the ability to include or exclude tables from the cloud migration. Currently, we in Microsoft, we decide what is being replicated and what is not for Microsoft-owned tables. And if you would like to override this decision, you need to do workarounds, either to delete the content from the table or to use some customized solutions to move the data to like XML ports, APIs, or JSON import export. So in order to enable you to be more efficient, we are thinking about including a new UI so you can override the decision that we made. So if you would like to move to changelog entries and maybe record links or any other table, you will be able to do this without the need to write any code, straight in the product. The only requirement will be that the table is not marked as internal, and then you will be able to override the decision that we did. Then the next topic is that we want to improve the handling of all per database tables, so we do not replace the entire table, but to delta sync it in the same way as we are delta syncing tenant media. The next item is that we want to disable assigning intelligent cloud permission sets to all users when you enable the cloud migration. We have received feedback from many of you that this is quite disrupting and that you also are not able to use service-to-service authentication because of this behavior. We are going to ship this functionality as an expert feature. There will be a small action so you can disable this default behavior. For the beginning, we will not disable it automatically. We also want to add warnings to the new UI. Warnings functionality is one of the things that is missing. So we are going to warn you if, for example, if the tenant media table got completely replaced, and also if you have defined any table mappings and no data was moved. If we see common patterns in the mistakes that are happening during the cloud migrations, then we can extend the warning systems with additional warnings. And the last item that we want to add is to add the ability to cancel the ongoing replication. Currently, you can do it by disabling the integration runtime on the machine which is hosting the integration runtime. However, this does not cancel it in all of the cases. So we want to give you a simple action in the UI so you can cancel the outgoing replication. So this is our current backlog based on your feedback and our thinking. If you have more items or if you have any feedback to the things that I have just presented, please reach out to us. So that would be all for today. For the summary, we have following recommendations.
So please consider migrating from Azure SQL if you have large databases to migrate, or otherwise you have to have very strong on-premise setup. Also, if you want to enjoy longer periods of delta sync, then set longer change track and retention period, and consider diagnostic runs to quickly test your future applications.
Yes. Also, you have seen from Julia's part that the cloud migration tooling can now support really large tenants. And we have shown you that you can now move customized fields with migration table mapping. And we would highly recommend to set up telemetry if you want to be able to troubleshoot the cloud migrations, get notifications through email, or if you want to build a nice dashboard. We would like to invite you to join us on Yammer. So if you have any feedback to the content that you have seen today, or if you have any questions, you can reach out to Julia and me on Yammer. We also have many other partners which are on this channel that are helping out. So we would strongly recommend that you join us here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.